It is a pleasure for me to invite to the podium this morning's keynote speaker, a famous Danish architect who have not only contributed to this city, but also to a large range of big and small cities around the world. Mr. Gehl, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I would like to start by telling you about some years ago, my wife and I, we were celebrating our 45th anniversary. And we were sitting here in Copenhagen, where we live, and it was a nice summer day, and we thought we should celebrate by having a good dinner in the city. So we took our bicycles and started to pedal down to the city. We were not quite young. We were around 65, 70, 136 combined. We were able to go side by side on the very good bicycle lanes. It was a safe trip. We could cross all the crossings. As you can see from the map, we did quite a bit of a tour around to look at the city center to find a good outdoor restaurant. We spent a little bit of time over on the other side of the harbor. We went back, found a good restaurant, a nice placed sidewalk restaurant, had a fantastic dinner, had one glass of red wine too much, and you can see that the tour back to home was a little bit wavery. That's one of the benefits of going by bicycle. Then we reached our home and we realized that we have done 19.8 kilometers on our 45th anniversary. And we sat down and discussed a little bit this wonderful tour through a wonderful city. And we realized that when we were married, two people around 70 could never have bicycled 20 kilometers in an evening. And there was no sidewalk cafes. So the 7,000 cafes, chairs we saw on our trip around were not there, any of them. All this has happened in the 45 years we had been married. And that gave me the reason to think about that I feel extremely lucky. And so does my family, my children, my grandchildren, to live in a city where I'm quite sure that for the past 50 years, every morning when you wake up, the city is a little bit better than yesterday. It's a fantastic thing. I've talked to many of my colleagues who live in cities where they say, every morning I wake up, it's a little bit worse than yesterday. Not so in Copenhagen. That is my point. I will tell about the old paradigm and the new paradigm. Because around the time when I was married, a little bit before, we had an enormous shift in European city planning because we had the beginning of the car invasion. The cars came streaming into Western Europe, and soon all the streets were filled with cars, and the major purpose of city planning was to make room for more cars. So the traffic engineers took over the planning, and capacity for more cars became the main purpose of city planning. And why doesn't it change? Can you change the slide, please? Here we are. Gradually, the quality of our European cities deteriorated. It was a gradual deterioration, but over the years it's become extremely bad in many, many cities. So many, many cities have not become better every day. They actually become worse every day. Many European cities look like this today. And of course, it's worse in Moscow, but that's not much comfort for the other European cities. Could you change again? In Copenhagen, very early on, actually this year, in 1962, 50 years ago, we started in Copenhagen to push the cars back. They have hardly arrived before we started to push them back. The main street, the whole main street through Copenhagen was pedestrianized. There was an enormous discussion. We are Danes, we are not Italians, we are not used to walking, we can never use public space. The cars were pushed off and we were Italians next day. This was, of course, appeared to be quite a bit of success. And now for 50 years, Copenhagen has every year gone about improving the conditions for pedestrians in the city. Could you change the slide? Of course, many cities in Europe have made pedestrian streets. They have made public spaces for people taking parking out and so on and so forth. Copenhagen has done the same with the city center. But one thing is different from Copenhagen, because very early on it was started here as in the first city in the world that just like the traffic engineers, they count all the cars every year. So here in Copenhagen we started to count all the pedestrians. We recorded the life in the city, and we were able year by year to have records of how the public life in the city developed. This has proved to be a very important political tool for improving the city. Could you change again? But not only in the city center. Actually in Copenhagen there's a citywide policy of improving the conditions for pedestrians. Most of the streets used to be 4 lanes. Now the streets are 2 lanes with a median, with trees, with bicycle lanes. A much nicer street and a much nicer environment, much easier to cross and more beautiful street. And this policy goes all the way to the sidewalk. The sidewalk should be smooth and well kept, should be easy to cross the streets, and the school children should have good access to walk to school. This is my granddaughter, 8 years old. She can now walk to school because the city has taken the sidewalks across the traffic streets. Copenhagen now has a policy of being the best city for people in the world. They have a very strict policy about how they should do from one time to the other, and we have to walk 20% more in Copenhagen before 2015, and we have to get started right away, I guess, to reach that. Another part of the Copenhagen plan has been to invite as much bicycling as possible. Again, there was a low point around 1960, but then especially from the oil crisis in 73, they worked very hard of improving the conditions for bicycles. They made, as you have seen, a complete citywide bicycle network. It's a really alternative transportation system going from one door to all the other doors. And what we've seen in Copenhagen is that every year the bicycling goes up, and we are now at a state where 37% of all the commuting to work is done by bicycle. That means that we have less traffic in the city of Copenhagen than most other cities of the same size, not only in Europe but worldwide, because the bicycles do so much. Of course, we have also, in the course of all this, encountered very serious problem. Now we have an awful problem in Copenhagen of congestion on the bicycle lanes. And there's really panic what to do about it. And then, of course, they found out that what they should do was just to double all the bicycle lanes, which they are in the process of doing. Where do they get the asphalt for this improvement? They get it from the cars, because a bicycle lane can take 5 times more people than can a car lane. So it's good traffic economy to widen the bicycle lanes if you have enough bicycles. So gradually Copenhagen becomes better and better for bicycles, and there are more and more bicycles. Also in Copenhagen we have now a policy that Copenhagen wants to be the best city for bicycling in the world. And again, we have to bicycle more and do a lot of other things to be more bicycle-oriented. I should also mention that all this about improving for the bicycle and improving for the pedestrians and the public life, most of this has been done at a time where Copenhagen was close to bankruptcy, was very poor. And it is so that what you do for people in the city, that is about the cheapest you can do. And even if you're very poor, you can always do something every year. And that's a good policy because it's quick, it's cheap, it's for everyone, and it's visible. People can see the improvements from one year to the next, even if the city is very poor. We've used this strategy in Copenhagen. It has been used in Barcelona in the 80s, in Lyon in the 1990s, and we can see that many cities who are in an economic crisis, they go for improvements for the people because it's so expensive to improve things for the cars or the trams or the trains. What is happening in Copenhagen is actually that we see the beginning of a very major new shift of paradigm after 50 years where the car traffic has really been the king in most of the cities, and also the modernistic planning principles. We see a much more orienting towards quality of life, towards solving some of the serious problems which we have to deal with. So today, if you ask any mayor, would you like a lively, livable city? Would you like a more attractive city, safe city? We need to have a sustainable city, and it's very urgent that we make a city which invites for healthy lifestyles. And it has been realized that if you have a people-oriented city policy, putting people first in your city policy, being sweet to the pedestrians, being sweet to the bicyclists, then actually in one single policy you can address all these issues. And that's exactly what we have seen being done in Copenhagen for quite a while. And one city after the other is now adopting this policy of people-oriented, people-first policy. Yeah, thanks. So basically what is happening in Copenhagen, in Strasbourg, in Lyon, and in Barcelona, and Melbourne, and whatever, that is, they say in the city council, in this city we'll do everything we can to make sure that people can walk and bicycle as much as possible in the course of their daily day doing. It's not about making bicycle lanes for recreation trips on Sundays. What is crucial is that it's on the Mondays. And the more people move with their own muscles, the better it is for the health, the longer they live, and the lower the expenses is for health expenses, and the fewer days in hospital and whatever. It's even found out that if you walk or bike an hour a day, you live 7 years more than the one who doesn't do it, and it's much safer, much cheaper for society. Also, there is this important link between walking, bicycling, and sustainability. The more people use their own energy, of course, that's better for sustainability. It doesn't pollute, no emissions, it's cheap. But also, if you want alternative to car transportation, you better make a very, very good public transportation system. And to have a good public transportation system, you will have to have a good public realm so that people can walk to the tram or the train in style and comfort and safety in either end of the journey. So public realm and public transportation, they are brothers and sisters. Both have to be improved to have alternatives to car transportation. And this is a very simple policy which has been utilized. I shall now come to the end. And just 2 days ago, the most famous of all the prizes for cities was announced in Singapore. It's the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize, and they give it for outstanding contributions for creation of vibrant, livable, sustainable urban communities. It's a brand new prize, and there's a lot of Singapore dollars attached to it and whatever. It was given out 2 years ago for the first time, and the recipient was the city of Bilbao, a European city. And we were all waiting now to see which city would get it this year. It was New York. So it went to the North American continent, and it was given there because they've done exactly that about vibrancy and sustainability. And what they've done in New York is, of course, and this is done in only a few years of time. It started in 2007 with Mayor Michael Bloomberg announcing the Plan NYC for making New York the greenest metropole in the world. He said, we have 1 million commuter cars. I want to get rid of them. We don't need to commute into Manhattan. We have a flat terrain. We have wide streets. We have a compact city districts. We can use our subway. We shall be able to walk in style on our sidewalks. And then we have the wide streets and the flat terrain. We could have a fantastic bicycle culture in New York. And then he started right away by putting in 6,000 kilometers of bicycle infrastructure. They are pouring it out with a speed you wouldn't imagine. This is 9th Avenue in the spring of 2008 and 9th Avenue in the fall of 2008. The kind of bicycle lanes they make is what they call Copenhagen-style bicycle lanes. That means that instead of having the bicyclists protecting the parked cars are protecting the bicycles. That's a much better system. So New York is full speed into making this fantastic bicycle network. Also, they are widening and improving the sidewalks. And here, this is Broadway, where they have widened the sidewalk and have put in bicycle lanes. And also, they realized that you can walk and walk and walk in New York, but you couldn't really sit and enjoy. There were hardly any sidewalk cafes. You just have to walk all the time. They said, all the European cities have wonderful squares. What do we have here? We have none. So they decided to have some very good squares, and they decided to close Broadway to traffic at the most important places for people, which is in front of Macy's. Here's Macy's 2009 in the spring and 2009 in the fall. And here is Times Square in the spring of 2009 and Times Square in the fall of 2009. It was made as an experiment. Don't worry, it's only an experiment, said Michael Bloomberg. Half a year later, he said, it's not an experiment no more. It's one of the best things which has happened to New York in the last 100 years. So New York got the prize this year, and they got it because they are an inspiring model for global cities. And that's fine. But then we can start to think about, where do New York get their model from? And we know that because the runner-up in the competition in Singapore was Copenhagen and Malmö. And I know for sure that New York has been over here in Copenhagen, and most of the inspiration and most of the ideas they are implementing now in New York, they have got here in Europe, actually many of them here in Copenhagen. So what is happening is that they are introducing European urban quality in the American cities, which is great. Let's export quality of cities to other continents. And let us also look to our own cities and make sure that when we look out over Europe, that we are also improving our own cities. There are many cities in Europe which are not the quality of New York at all. There are many cities which every year is a little bit worse than the year before. Especially, I've seen many cities in the eastern part of Europe where in many cities they think that freedom from communism is a right to park everywhere. And that is only the first stage. The next stage is that we shall implement throughout Europe quality in our cities, and the safest bit to do that would be to make a people-first city planning policy. The wind has changed. We have a new paradigm now. We need livable, sustainable, and healthy cities. We need cities which are better every day, even in Brussels. Good luck, Europe.
Mr. Jan Gehl, thank you very much. I can actually add, I work for the Danish Broadcasting Corporation, which is a public service broadcaster which produces radio, television, and so forth. And we have built a new headquarters just outside Copenhagen, not outside Copenhagen, a mile from here. And there's a big dispute right now about parking space. We're about 2,000 people who work at the Danish Broadcasting Corporation. The thing is, the park spaces that we are discussing so vividly at our job is bicycle parking spaces. There are actually no problems parking your car. You can pay for it and there are plenty of space, but it's a little more troublesome getting rid of your bike because there are plenty of them just around. So actually there are rules now that you can only put your bike here because they're actually all over the place. So just to add to what you're saying. Now we will move to Dunkirk, the mayor of Dunkirk, Michel Delebarre. The floor is yours. You may go here, you may sit, whatever you prefer, sir.
Merci. Madame la Présidente, Mesdames, Messieurs.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen.
Les amis du Comité des Régions.
Our friends at the Committee of Regions have thought that it would be a good idea for me to come and have a look around Copenhagen and even try a bike. So I'll be leaving you as soon as possible to have a go at that. What they didn't say is that to get to Copenhagen this morning, I had to leave Dunkirk at 3 a.m. in order to arrive here at about 8. They didn't exactly give me all the details on that. So if you have problems at some point in my presentation, it's not the headset that's not working, it's the speaker that's not working. So, a few remarks on what's at stake as part of our urban ambition, which we think should be the keyword of Europe's progress. And 3 comments with 3 hats on. First of all, as chair of our COTER commission at the Committee of Regions. Secondly, as mayor of Dunkirk, a city and port in the north of France. And of course, I'm chairman of the council of the urban area. I'm a little bit like the mayor of New York, in fact. Not because I build 4,000 miles of cycle tracks a year, but I have sought inspiration in here and Malmö, so perhaps it's not wrong to go that way. History shows us that when, in 1990, when François Mitterrand appointed a minister for cities for the first time in France, it was me he chose for that responsibility. So I think apart from climate issues, which of course are important, one of the biggest issues worldwide, the second issue that I see as being essential is the development and the fate of our cities. In our cities, we have a concentration of all the constraints, the problem of controlling costs, controlling traffic, controlling waste. But it's also in our cities that the future of all our social exchanges, our social confrontations too, will happen, and the development of ambitious technologies, also further education, research, culture. In a recent report, one of my colleagues in the French Senate The report was entitled "The Future of Our Cities," and in it he was pointing out that, you know, in 2025, and that's tomorrow morning, you know, that's just beyond the next cohesion policy period. We're taking today the decisions for 2025, and you look at how cities are developing around the world. He thinks that by 2025 there will be 40 cities with between 10 and 40 million inhabitants around the world, 35 of them in the emerging countries, the developing countries. That the world population will go from 50% urban to 65% urban, and in the period which will be the time that we are going to be debating here, 2.5 hours, there will be 20 million new urban citizens around the world. That's an extraordinary explosion. And there will be 1.5 billion people living in shanty towns, informal settlements. That is the way things are going. And so I think that our president had a very good idea when she decided to stop and take a look at this at urban development here in Europe. And I have 4 recommendations for you. The first of these, and I'm sure that a number of speakers will agree with it over these 2 days, I think we need to avoid the usual pitfall of the false distinctions between urban and rural development. I don't believe in that distinction. That's not a valid definition as I see it. You can't separate things in that way. Administrative and legal decisions in a city anywhere in the world affect the rural areas around it. Cities play a role as a convergence of economic and social life. That's what we are concerned about. And every city official, elected official, will always tell you, and when they're in a rural area, they always define themselves in reference to a nearby city, one of Europe's great cities. I often think about the issue of integrating rural and urban environments, meshing these two areas. I believe more and more in the notion of urban regions rather than just cities. So that's why I'd like to call upon the European institutions to change their heading on this and take account of the EU recommendations on the future of the Regional Development Fund. We shouldn't just talk about geographical cohesion and social cohesion within cities, which are supposed to receive about 50%, more than 50% of cohesion funds. That's got to be part of a broader regional strategy and take account of the role of cities as the growth powerhouse for regions, and therefore the links between the city and the rural area. In other words, we want the urban strands of operational programs to conceive of cities in the context of an integrated approach, which will include neighborhoods, cities, urban areas, metropolitan areas, and city regions. So I think that we should make it a more geographical type of planning, territorial type of planning, and that way we can tap into different funds, not just a single dedicated fund. The Regional Development Fund could go to sustainable urban development, and just delegating all that to the cities is not enough, given the issues that we have to face in our cities. Nor can urban issues simply be about resources assigned through integrated territorial investment. As I see it, we also need to implement the priorities of other regional operational programs. My second recommendation is not to divide cities, to set them off against one another. We're always hearing debate about this. You know, there's academic research going on. We have ideal cities being planned in China, in Russia, in the United Arab Emirates. On internet, you can design your own sustainable city. But beyond these urban utopias, there's a lot that's really been done on the ground, and I think we're not paying enough attention to existing cities which are planning their growth over a period of one generation, and it could serve as a model for sustainable development where we are dealing with brownfield sites, for example, and recovering and reclaiming those brownfield sites. So obviously, it's not just about the ultra-modern neighbourhoods that are everybody focuses on. We've got to think more about more sustainable cities that are thinking about how to rebuild and develop. Of course, we have environmental musts, but a sustainable city is a city that can keep going over time, that can retain its identity, its sense of itself, and its long-term dynamism. My third recommendation is to put urban renovation projects at the heart of Europe's concerns rather than just raw statistics. The Commission is a platform for sustainable urban development, but it's not relevant if it's only based on arithmetic, based on population numbers, rather than the quality of integrated strategies for sustainable development of our cities. It would be all too easy for the administrators there in Brussels, and indeed in some of the member states too, to look only at our great cities. I think that would deprive Europe of the benefits of emulation between cities, or indeed competition in cities, which always stimulates us, as Jacques Delors reminded us. And as for GDP, as we've said in the Committee of Regions, it is a simplistic indicator which masks far too much the complications of geographical cohesion. Cities are right at the heart of our societies and cultures. It's not just about room, it's in our cities that social evolution is at its fastest. So we have a twofold phenomenon of concentration in space and in time, and that makes our cities, because we focus so much on them, laboratories for governance and political action. So what we've got to do is to try out experimentation, freedom, flexibility, not just size or population. Let's go for that. Flexibility is important because this is about the future of our cities, so we should ensure that European funding promotes that, rather than simply noting population growth. My fourth recommendation is that the European Union should play its part to the full, supporting multi-level governance, which is the future of our cities. We need a partnership approach to cohesion policy beyond member states, beyond regions, if we're going to be able to tackle the challenges of the future of our cities. And I think that we've already noted our scepticism about these policy concentrations as suggested by the Commission under the Regional Development Fund in targeted regions, or what might be targeted regions. We can't integrate everything. We shouldn't be naive about this in the priorities and the tracks that the Commission is pointing to. When you try to incorporate into your priorities sustainable urban transport, which we need in our cities, you will not find somewhere to put it. So if you want to develop our cities, you're going to have to deal with that problem, sustainable urban transport. We are the Committee of Regions, so let's fight to ensure that we still have room for experimentation and integration. Those are the few ideas I wanted to put to you. Perhaps I could stress as well that cross-border regions, which we all know in our countries and in which we've sought to defend the concept of the GeoCity, these cross-border regions or cross-border areas are areas in which European urban development is best represented. There are major urban issues in all of these areas, and perhaps it's for us to point out that through this European local authorities grouping, we can perhaps support that and promote it. There you are. That's our story, the story of the European Union, and indeed of Europe, is linked to that of our cities today, Our cities are one of the great challenges of the 21st century, so let's mobilize so that the European Union can play a full part in that, because I think that's what this meeting is all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And just to remind you, there will be a chance afterwards where we will ask some questions, and you will also have a chance to intervene if you feel there are points that need to be made. The next speaker to take the floor is the Mayor of Sarajevo, Mr. Alija Behmen. Please, the floor is yours.
Dame I gospodo, uvaženi.
Ladies and gentlemen, honourable participants of this summit, dear friends, I come from Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and I would like to greet you from my city. We hope that this meeting will be a further contribution to peace, cooperation and shared progress. Now, although at the end of the last century, Sarajevo suffered a 1,444-day siege and suffered also unprecedented cultural and infrastructure damage, unprecedented since the end of the Second World War. Nonetheless, Sarajevo has been able to preserve its Olympic and multicultural identity, and so Sarajevo still stands for peace and tolerance, bringing together people of different religions and nations. It's an honour to be at this eminent summit today on the invitation of Mrs. Mercedes Bresso. So my presence here is a great honour for the city of Sarajevo and a great honour for me as the mayor of Sarajevo. Sarajevo is a city which has arrived in the 21st century. And in fact, the 21st century is defined by this new phenomenon, urbanization, and that actually means that we are presented with huge, insuperable problems sometimes. Urbanization doesn't just mean growth of cities, but also the spreading of urban lifestyle into surrounding areas with all that entails in relation to housing, industry, transport and leisure activities, but also involves organising festivals and different cultural events. So these basic urban facilities have to be made available to all inhabitants, or the majority of inhabitants of a city. Cities are arenas. Cities are arenas, but also engines of cultural and social change and transformation. Every city is like a living organism with its own individual qualities. Every city is different, but nonetheless, all cities have a series of things in common. And in fact, when we build up networks of cities on these things that we have in common, whereas differences in identity can actually lead to a contribution towards peace and stability through the exchange between these different cities. So cities are centres of economic, political and social production, and they are hubs of global networks today. And cities are very close to the grassroots, close to citizens, and in this way, citizens, because of the functions they perform and because of their dynamism, actually work as a link between the people and higher levels of government, therefore ensuring more democracy. So in order to ensure that more democracy can be developed, what you need is very responsible and open management. And you need reliable and determined mayors who have clear visions, who want to improve the living quality, the standard of living of their citizens. So those who manage our cities have the duty to ensure that cities are areas where cohesion is created for the whole state, because cities can be models of best practice and a good example for all institutions of the state. But democratic processes require active and committed citizens. Without their help, we can't make our cities into areas where people want to live and work. So today's cities are very developed, and it's impossible to stop change and progress and the developments that go hand in hand with that. Changes in the way in which cities are run are determined by changes in the economy, and there are also international consequences. Cities bring together a lot of resources, but the way in which you manage the finances and provide services, urban, social and economic organisation are very important. And so, in fact, what we've seen is a new sort of city emerging, global cities. And one of the consequences of the economic changes is that you see the emergence of social inequalities. You see the disappearance of small and medium-sized enterprises. You see the emergence of the need for highly skilled workers, and you also see a lack of youngsters who complete their schooling, so they don't have the skills required by the market. Global cities, at the same time, are important destinations for migrants. The most important reason for the increased number of migrants in global cities is the fact that these cities don't just require and create high-skilled jobs, but these global cities also provide a lot of underpaid jobs and unskilled and low-paid jobs. Companies offer highly skilled jobs, but they also offer low-paid jobs, and they attract in this way lots of economically vulnerable migrants. Global cities are called dual cities as well because of this polarization. You end up having polarization between different social classes and different ethnic groups. And you see these characteristics in cities of other parts of the world, even cities that aren't recognized as global cities. Even smaller cities can have these problems of polarization. So Sarajevo has the same migratory phenomena as other capitals. We don't have them to such an extreme because our population size is still quite small, around 500,000. Compared to global cities, our population in Sarajevo is negligible. But you can see from the criteria of, you can see when it comes to the criteria of providing good lifestyle, you can see that there are problems in Sarajevo, there are shortcomings, and we can only overcome those by being committed for a very long time. And at the moment, there have been changes in the lifestyle of the citizens of Sarajevo, and these changes, these transformations have affected all social classes. Sarajevo has good conditions for good circumstances for further development. It is a well-functioning urban unit. One of our advantages is that we aren't overpopulated, unlike many other cities of the world. Although more and more people are arriving in Sarajevo, nonetheless, this city, unlike many others, is not congested, is not overpopulated. We've seen a change now in the way in which we assess cities. We now see a debate about city systems, and if you want to have a good city system, the three key elements are management, financing and governance. You have to have all these three key elements in place if a city is to do its duties, to fulfill its tasks. And now, of course, because of the last decades having brought a lot more decentralization, you've seen a transfer of tasks to the local level, but that hasn't been accompanied by fiscal decentralization, and local governments can only raise some taxes. But however, even good management systems can end up being inefficient if they aren't underpinned by appropriate financing. Dear colleagues, dear friends, the vision of the future development of Sarajevo encompasses all sorts of aspects, territorial, economic, environmental, social, and it involves all sorts of actors, public actors, private sector actors, civil society, local community, individuals, and all of these actors should work together rapidly in order to ensure the functionality of the city and territorial cohesion. We are working on regeneration and renovation of existing suburbs of the city. We're improving the quality of our building stock. We are ensuring functional and territorial cohesion, and we're working on energy efficiency, and we're also working on ensuring a uniform standard of living, both in the centre of the city and in the suburbs. We don't want there to be a gulf between the standard of living in the centre and in the suburbs of the city. At the same time, it is our goal that we want to to ensure both metropolisation and demetropolisation through new state structures. New suburbs are being built on the basis of shared cultural